The wind howled through the burnt canyons of Ardent Vale, carrying with it the scent of metal and ash. Cale crouched beside the remains of a collapsed refinery, his sensor array flickering weakly in the dying light. Every step on this planet felt like trespassing on the bones of something ancient. The sky was pale violet, fractured with glowing fissures that pulsed like veins in a wounded beast. Radiation storms swept through the valleys without warning, and the ground itself sometimes trembled, as if the world still remembered what had been taken from it. He set down his pack, adjusted his respirator, and activated his thermal shield. The hum comforted him. Machines didn't lie. That was when he heard it, a faint scraping sound behind him. He turned sharply, flashlight cutting through the dust. At first, he thought it was debris shifting in the wind. But then, a small head rose from the rubble. Scaled. Narrow. Eyes like molten amber. A hatchling. Then another. 4 in total, emerging cautiously, ribs visible beneath cracked hides. They stared at him, silent and trembling. He knew the stories, dragon spawn devoured anything weaker than themselves. But these looked more like refugees than predators. Cale exhaled, half in disbelief, half in pity. You picked the wrong human, he muttered. He had barely enough ration gel to survive another 2 days. Still, when one of the hatchlings whimpered, a sound halfway between a hiss and a child's cry, something in him broke. He split the ration block into fragments and set them down. The creatures sniffed, hesitated, then devoured the pieces. He smiled faintly, but the warmth faded quickly. From somewhere beyond the ridge, a low vibration rippled through the rock. His instruments flickered. Energy signatures spiked, massive, coordinated, alive. Cale froze, scanning the horizon. In the haze, 2 immense blue lights blinked once, and vanished. The hatchlings huddled close to him, shivering. For the first time, Cale wondered if he had just fed more than hungry mouths, perhaps he had fed something watching through them. Cale didn't sleep that night. The campfire's glow flickered weakly against the canyon walls, casting moving shadows that looked too deliberate to be shaped by wind. The hatchlings had gathered close to the heat source, their scales now faintly luminescent, pulsing in unison as if responding to an unseen rhythm. He tried to convince himself it was thermal regulation, a biological quirk. But when his wrist console began to record electromagnetic fluctuations synced with their breathing, reason started to fracture. The signal wasn't random. It carried structure, a sequence, pulses spaced like words. He amplified it, and a low harmonic vibration filled the air. It was almost like a chant. The smallest hatchling lifted its head, eyes glowing faintly blue, and repeated the tone. Cale stumbled backward, a chill crawling through his suit. He realized they weren't communicating with him. They were responding to something far beyond. Hours passed. The sky turned black and metallic, the stars blurring under thin streaks of plasma clouds. When he finally dared to look toward the ridge where he'd seen the blue lights, he found nothing but darkness. Then, in the silence between breaths, came the faintest echo of a voice, not through air, but directly in his mind. A single word, drawn from a language that was neither human nor draconic, yet understood instantly. Watched. The hatchling stirred violently, wings fluttering, as if terrified of the same presence. Cale deactivated his headlamp and crouched behind a fragment of hull plating, his pulse hammering. Sensors screamed, a colossal energy field was forming just beyond the canyon, measured in terajoules. His drone recorded a faint distortion, a shimmering curve of space bending as something vast descended through the upper atmosphere. He whispered into his log recorder, voice trembling, observation confirmed. Not atmospheric interference. Intelligent origin. Eyes, blue, luminous, non-hostile so far. Then he froze again. The hatchlings were staring past him, not at the sky, but into the darkness directly behind him. Something moved there, slow, deliberate, ancient, and the ground beneath his boots began to hum like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. The hum rose until it became a trembling resonance inside Kale's bones. Dust lifted from the ground, suspended in the air like a frozen storm. His visor flickered with interference, his system struggling to interpret the sudden surge of energy saturating the canyon. Then the light came, soft, radiant, and alive. It poured from the darkness in slow waves, illuminating a vast shape coiled along the cliffside. The creature's body shimmered like liquid metal, scales patterned with streams of glowing code that pulsed across its form as though written by the planet itself. Kale could not tell where matter ended and energy began. The hatchlings knelt, trembling. Their eyes reflected the same deep blue as the entities, and Kale suddenly understood, this was no wild dragon. It was something older, something beyond flesh. The being's voice came not through air but through the electricity in his veins. Why do you feed what is not yours? The tone wasn't anger, it was curiosity, like an ancient mind dissecting an anomaly. Kale struggled to speak. They were starving, he said aloud, his voice barely audible. I just couldn't let them die. Silence. Then a cascade of symbols streamed across his visor, unknown language, mathematical and rhythmic. His console recorded bursts of quantum data, each pulse reshaping the digital architecture of his equipment. He realized, with growing awe, that the dragon was interfacing directly with his neural link. Memories flickered before his eyes, moments of loss, compassion, defiance, all unfolding within seconds. The dragon was reading him. Then the voice shifted, layered now with emotion. You are seen, Kale of the broken world. The test begins. The light intensified, and the hatchlings cried out as the ground split open beneath them. Kale reached instinctively, catching the smallest by its wing, dragging it back as the fissure erupted in a column of pale fire. From within that radiance, a vision unfurled, cities of dragons floating above oceans of clouds, then burning, collapsing into silence. He gasped. The blue eyes blinked once more, ancient and sorrowful, before the light receded, leaving only the echo of a whisper that would haunt his mind forever. Mercy remembered. When Kale awoke, the canyon was silent except for the distant hiss of cooling stone. His instruments were offline, the displays blank, as though time itself had stuttered. The hatchlings lay scattered around him, breathing but exhausted, faint traces of blue energy flickering beneath their scales. He touched one gently, it flinched but did not move away. The ground still radiated heat from the fissure, and in the ashes, he found patterns burned into the rock, circular markings that pulsed faintly when he approached, whispering fragments of sound too low for human ears. He recorded the data manually, sketching the glowing symbols in his field journal. When he finished, the markings suddenly rearranged themselves, forming new shapes, an answer to his curiosity. Kale froze. The translation module on his visor activated of its own accord and projected a single word in human script, memory. Then, the world around him dissolved. He was no longer in the canyon. The landscape unfolded into a sea of light, endless and shifting, as if he had stepped inside a living network. Streams of data flowed between colossal crystalline structures suspended in the void. Dragons, beings made of pure energy, moved through the current, their minds merging and dividing in perfect harmony. He heard their thoughts as symphonies, memories of an empire spanning galaxies, of harmony lost to pride. A voice rose above them all, the same one that had spoken before. We watched as your kind consumed stars to survive. We judged, but we did not act. Until mercy was shown where survival ruled. Kale's body trembled as the vision collapsed. He was back in the canyon, gasping, the hatchlings awake and watching him. They moved closer, their eyes glowing brighter now, not with hunger, but awareness. The markings on the rock dimmed and cooled. In the distance, thunder rolled, not natural, but mechanical. Kale looked up to see ships piercing the horizon, their hulls glowing red. His visor tagged their signatures automatically, draconic warcraft. Not all had approved of mercy. The sky fractured into crimson light as the warcraft broke through the upper atmosphere. Their wings of plasma unfolded, shimmering like blades, casting shadows that rippled over the canyon floor. Kale's pulse quickened. His sensors rebooted suddenly, flooded with data streams he didn't request. Encrypted transmissions in draconic code. The hatchlings whimpered, their scales pulsing erratically as if they could feel the incoming storm. Above the roar of engines, the ancient voice returned to his mind, steady and cold. Do not run. Witness. A beam of light descended, enveloping him and the hatchlings in a sphere of suspended gravity. The world blurred, and then they were somewhere else, inside a structure of living metal, translucent and alive, like being inside the bloodstream of a planet. Columns of energy formed shifting corridors, and at the center hovered a massive core of interwoven memories. Dragons of light surrounded it, their forms unstable, flickering between physical and digital existence. Sarantha's presence filled the chamber, her eyes two vast galaxies turning in slow contemplation. This is the nexus, she said within his mind. Here, thought shapes reality. Here, truth decides survival. Kale felt his consciousness stretched across time, pulled through moments not his own, a hatchling learning flight above burning worlds, a dragon's grief as its kin vanished into stars, humanity's first landing on Dravara, desperate and naive. Suddenly, the chamber dimmed. From the edges of the nexus, another presence emerged, colder, sharper. A red dragon formed, wings crackling with static fire. He is unworthy, Varkrol's voice thundered. You would merge the eternal with the fragile. Kale's body convulsed under the mental pressure as their wills clashed. Sarantha's voice steadied him. Prove your species, human. Show us why mercy should live. Then the walls of the nexus rippled, and Kale was thrust into a simulation, a battlefield of ash, surrounded by shadows of his fears. Machines of war advanced, his own reflection among them, weapon raised. He understood the trial. It wasn't to conquer. It was to choose restraint. Slowly, he lowered his weapon, meeting his own eyes with calm resolve. The battlefield disintegrated into blue light. Somewhere beyond, Varkrol's roar of fury faded into silence. The light of the nexus dimmed until only Kale's heartbeat remained audible, echoing through endless silence. When the simulation dissolved, he found himself standing on a glass-like platform suspended over the heart of the dragon's memory core. Saranth and Varkrol faced one another, their immense forms locked in a stillness that felt older than time. Between them floated the hatchlings, now glowing brighter than ever, threads of blue energy linking them to Kale's pulse. His act of mercy had become a living connection, proof of coexistence. Varkrol's crimson armor fractured, his roar fading into static as his projection unraveled. The nexus trembled but did not fall. Instead, a vast harmony filled the void, the combined resonance of thousands of dragon minds merging into unity. Saranth turned her gaze to Kale, her voice soft yet immense. You have altered the pattern. The covenant begins. The light around them expanded, reaching into orbit, through clouds, across cities once silent. Kale saw human colonies awakening to transmissions of peace written in light and song. Dragon fleets descended not as conquerors but as guardians. For the first time in centuries, the planet breathed without fear. The hatchlings circled him once, their wings brushing against his arms, and then soared upward, joining a constellation newly born, for stars burning with blue flame. Kale fell to his knees, overwhelmed. His visor displayed fragments of data, alliances forming, energy networks stabilizing, and atmospheric shields recalibrating to sustain both species. Sarantha's final words echoed through the link. Mercy is the bridge between worlds. Keep it, human, and both shall endure. When the light finally faded, Kale stood once more in the canyon where it had all begun. The wind was gentler now, carrying not ash but warmth. His ration pack lay empty, but his heart was full. Above him, the twin suns rose, their reflection captured in the eyes of unseen watchers, still blue, still patient, but no longer testing. They watched in trust. And for the first time, Kale smiled, knowing the age of isolation had ended.